We will go ahead and get started. We're a couple of minutes early, but we have such a good crowd tonight. Welcome to our work session for January. Glad you can join us. Have a very good crowd tonight. We like to begin each meeting with a moment of silence, and I would like to ask you to keep the Crocker family, the family of the young student at Walhalla Middle School, and the staff, faculty, everyone concerned with that situation, keep them in your prayers. And also Carol Ott, one of our teachers at Tomasi Salem Elementary, her husband passed away unexpectedly at a very young age last week, and just ask you to remember those folks in your thoughts and prayers. Join me if you'd like. Thank you. I think the first item on the agenda is some special recognition of some special guests we have tonight.
We do, and I'm going to let Mr. Hanby kind of serve as the MC. So we're going to recognize some folks in just a minute. We're going to get all five of you, if you would. Oh, yeah, well, you know what? No, we'll do that after. We'll get the pledge after this. So we'll get all five of you down there in just a minute to take a picture, because we want to get a picture for our website with some of these young ladies. Mr. Hanby?
All right, I'd like to ask the coaches and the girls from the Seneca Cross Country team to start making their way up to the front, and I'm going to read you some of the accolades for this group. The Seneca Girls Cross Country team had an incredible season. Their success came from their dedication and preparation, attitude, and willingness to push themselves each time they trained or competed. Because of all their hard work, these ladies won 7 of their 9 meets this year, including winning their region, the upper state, and the state championship meets. Each of these ladies deserves credit and recognition for their sacrifice and effort this season, and I think we've got most of them here. Catherine Cann, Michaela Collins, Sydney Doyle, Nicole Fegan, Cheyenne Holder, Ava Nimmons, Soraya Stewart, Carson Tao, and Madison Tao. And here are a few of the accolades earned by the ladies. Catherine, Micaiah, Sydney, Nicole, Ava, Soraya, and Carson. That's the whole team that competed, because you run 7 runners. Earned all region for finishing in the top 15 at the region. Carson was named the Region 1-3A Female Runner of the Year. Catherine, Michaela, Nicole, Soraya, and Carson earned all state for finishing in the top 15 at the state meet. Each runner finished in the top 20 at the state meet. Carson finished 2nd overall at the state meet, breaking 19 minutes while doing so. Soraya and Carson were both named All-State by the high school sports report. This is the first Seneca Cross Country team, boys or girls, to ever win a state championship. And we'd also like to recognize their coaches. They are coached by Coach Quackenbush, Coach Sons, Coach Cross, and Coach Wall. Congratulations on a well-deserved and successful season.
So board members, we'd like to get y'all up front to take a picture, if that's okay. And we're hopeful that by lunchtime tomorrow, we'll have your picture on the district website, so you can look for that tomorrow.
It's about y'all.
That's the way we want it.
We get to see everybody, Mr. Moore. Come on.
Okay. I'll tell you like the elementary school teachers. You can't see me. All right, here we go. Smile on 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And one more. Congratulations, ladies.
And one more thing before they, as they return to their seats. The school board has a goal of our district being a top 10 district in the state of South Carolina. There are over 80 school districts in the state of South Carolina, and they do want us to perform well academically. But they've also stated that they want us to show excellence in all areas of performance in the school district. This is a great example of students in our school district excelling and certainly earning that top 10 designation. As a matter of fact, best designation. So congratulations to all of you.
Our coaches are very humble. They were all named Coaches of the Year, State Coaches of the Year.
Great.
They didn't put that in the bio.
Was the South Carolina State 3A Coach of the Year, and Coach Cross was the assistant coach of the entire state, not
That's awesome.
all levels, not just 3A.
That's
So,
awesome. So one more round of applause for the
Okay, we have another recognition, and I get to do that one as well with help from the board members. We'd like for
We need you to come
everybody back down there.
I'm sorry.
I knew that, that's what.
Not sure if you're familiar with it, but there was some a legislative act several years ago that's called Act 155, and what it did was it allowed folks who maybe when they were going through school didn't pass a standardized test but had all the credits that they needed, the 20, the 18, the 22, the 24 credits that they needed to get their high school diploma, and you file for that. And we want to recognize a young lady who has done that, and she is receiving her West Oak High School diploma. And so we want to bring her up and recognize Miss Peggy Beatrice Black Sullivan.
Yeah, let's take that out. Turn it around and hold it, and we'll get a picture of you with the school board as well. All right.
Ready? Smile. Thank you.
We appreciate you doing that. You shake everybody's hand.
Just give them some.
No, actually, have somebody pledge for us before she does her.
She does.
I think she's got somebody to pledge for us.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance and school highlights from James M. Brown Elementary. Ms. Robertson, the principal, would you like to introduce your student first?
I
And
will
then we'll.
definitely do. I will introduce my students. If my James and Brown Elementary students will come forward. As they come forward, these students are part of our top 15 that are making their way to the top 6, and then next the top 3 to go to the Amazing Show. And so I appreciate you allowing them to talk to you as they were going through. That's part of this competition. It's in Atlanta in February at the Ron Clark Academy, and they will be competing with people across the nation for this competition. But it's a chance for them to learn how to small talk and interact with other people and etiquette and politics and well-rounded kids. And that's what we have before us, and they are part of our top 15. So part of their job today was to do small talk and working the room. And they did an amazing job, considering that the last time we worked the room, they worked the room with teachers they knew. So this was definitely outside of their comfort zone, so we appreciate you allowing them to do that, and they did an amazing job. So now we will lead them in the Pledge of Allegiance and the flag. Thank you.
Attention, salute, flag.
And now we are going to do a quick highlight of James M. Brown Elementary School. And we're going to start first with a quick video, and then we'll have 2 things afterwards.
Should all acquaintance be forgotten?
something that we operate on is several different principles, but two of those main things that we have are houses and gym store. And so let Ms. Garland, our assistant principal, start with houses first, and she'll give you a brief overview of those.
So you may have noticed in that video, and that was kind of a highlight reel of some of the things we had in the fall semester, and we played that for kids when we first came back after the break. Just kind of get them excited to be back. It's always hard to come back after Christmas break, so it was a positive way to start the year. But you may have noticed in some of the pictures, our kids had, and staff had different colored t-shirts, they all say, "Be the Magic," and that, each color represents a different house. So following the same idea of Harry Potter, where the students are put into houses where they kind of build a community. We do something similar at James and Brown, where we have students spin the wheel when they, at the end of the year last year, that's how we started our sorting. And then now we have new students as they come in, spin the wheel as well, and put them in a house. So we have 5 houses altogether. We have the orange house, which is the house of service, the green house, which is the house of manners, the diamond colored house, which is the house of achievement, the blue house is rigor, and the red house is teamwork. So we talk about how all together the acronym is SMART. So we are trying to build a SMART house with all of our students and faculty. So it's a really nice way for us to build relationships across grade levels, because students from pre-K through 5th grade are all random in the houses. And it's also a great way for us to build relationships with teachers that may not always be at your grade level. So each teacher's in a house, and so we're building a community within a school.
And then also our GEMS 4, which stands for G is get out of your seat. So when our kids address the classroom or address the teacher, they do get out of their seat. And our E is all eyes are on them. So eye contact is very big, and we expect them to look there. And again, we're trying to create that whole child, that whole mentality of building that child up and preparing them for that next spot in this world, whether or not it's middle school, high school, their college, their career, whatever it may be, they're going to need these skills. M is manners, so yes ma'am, no ma'am, thank you, please. And then also S is social interaction. So just being able to communicate with someone, but then also when a guest from the district office, when one of administration walks in, there is a class greeter who greets us, does a handshake, tells us what they're doing, and then shows us where we can go have a seat in the classroom. So just give them those opportunities that we can always operate on being kind and being a change. And by doing those two things, we have seen a tremendous difference. And just seeing that 2018 highlight reel still brings chills and still brings all the smiles in the world, knowing that we are giving our children that opportunity that they clearly deserve. And we do it every day with a smile and love and hope. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Ms. Garland and Ms. Robertson, for the presentation, and thanks to you and your staff at James M. Brown for all you do for the district. We appreciate it. Any of the students who would like to leave, since tomorrow is a school day, you're welcome to leave whenever you so desire. And thank you for being here. Very good job. Next item on the agenda is approval of tonight's agenda. If I could get a motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the January 14th, 2019 work session agenda.
I'll second.
Motion and second to approve. Any additions, deletions, or discussion? All in favor? This is public comment is next. Ms. Gibson, do we have anyone signed up?
We have two.
Two?
Miss Hubbard is first.
Okay. Ms. Hubbard? You just come to the mic, and for the record, just state your name, please, ma'am.
Good evening, school board trustees and personnel. My name is Christy Hubbard, and with me tonight I brought my husband, David Hubbard, my son Isaac Porter, and his friend Zeke. They all came to support me. I want to apologize in advance if I get emotional. My wounds are raw. I emailed you all a letter on January 3rd citing my concerns over the need for mental health counselors in all of our area schools. As you may remember from the letter, suicide recently turned our family's world upside down. Conventional wisdom tells us that today's kids love sharing. When I say sharing, it's usually via social media, texting, or just by talking to one another. Even in this day and age where oversharing may be the norm, the discussion surrounding depression and mental health issues still tends to remain taboo, and that can and does result in tragedy. We need to teach our kids what to do when they experience suicidal thoughts, and also what to do if a friend has expressed suicidal thoughts to them. They need to know they need to run to the nearest caring parent or adult and get the information in the hands of someone who will help them. Kids cannot sit around and listen to that person who has told them those thoughts, or to themselves, and think it's going to get better. Seek help, and seek it now needs to be drilled in them. We always hear live for the moment. I dislike that phrase now. Suicidal people cannot see past the moment. Kids and adults need to realize that God put them here for a reason. Even though they may feel like they are alone at the time, they are loved, they are not a burden, and they will be missed. We as society are not doing enough to help. I know it has to start at home, but it always doesn't. I want you to know if suicide can happen to my family, it can happen to anyone's. If we had mental health counselors in our schools, they would help tremendously. There could be a change. Our kids need to see them daily and to learn to trust them so they will be able to talk to them if needed. I truly believe that filling those positions in the schools would be a great benefit to the students and the teachers. They can help the teachers identify potential problems that could pose a threat to the school or to others. Not only could they help the children one-on-one, they could also hold assemblies in suicide and depression. The assemblies could have speakers come in and talk, like me, so the kids would see what happens to your family when you do this. There could also be speakers come in who have been in depressed states, and the kids could also see that these people are now functioning adults who made it past that chapter in their lives. Valuable learning tools could be sent home or emailed to parents to help educate them as well. The possibilities and the positive things they could do are endless. It all starts with education. You guys have our kids the majority of the day. Help us help them. Our brains need to be monitored just as much as our hearts. Thank you for your time this evening. Our family appreciates all you do for our kids. And again, I hope you consider adding mental health counselors to our area schools.
Thank you, Ms. Hubbard.
Stacy Brooks.
Hey, thank y'all so much for having me. I also lost my son to suicide. Austin was 21 when he passed away. But when Austin was 14, he attempted suicide, and he was a student in the 8th grade at West Oak Middle, and nothing was ever, done about anything about his mental health. And I too, think that we need mental health counselors in our school. Our kids cannot go to school and think that, nobody is listening to them. I have, the day my son passed away, I made it my mission to speak out about suicide and the effects that it has, not only just the family. I mean, it affects everybody that knew my son, knew his personality. We have to change the stigma around suicide. Suicide is nothing for us to be ashamed of. It is, mental health is no different from somebody having cancer or a heart disease. You know, it is a disease. Mental health is a disease that, you know, causes depression, anxiety. In 2012, Governor Haley signed the Jason Flatt Act into legislation, and that requires mandatory youth suicide awareness and prevention and training for all middle and high school teachers and staff, and that is in law in the state of South Carolina. So if we are, you know, if all of our teachers are required to do this training, why are we, you know, not letting our kids talk about suicide at school? And you know, suicide has always been like shoved under a rug. Until this happened to me, you know, I didn't know anything about suicide. You know, but when it did happen, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, this could have been prevented. You know, if my son had help at school, you know, when he was 14, you know, he would still be here with us now. And talking about suicide does not increase, you know, the effects of it. Like if it happens at school. I don't believe that, you know, that talking about it makes the kid want to go and do it. They need to know the devastation that suicide causes. And you know, until we do something about it, it's going to keep happening. The numbers here in Oconee County have declined since my son passed away. In 2016, 17 people died by suicide, just in Oconee County. In 2017, 16 people died by suicide, and then last year, 12 died by suicide. There should be no suicides. Suicide should not exist. And if we had mental health counselors in our school to help our kids realize, you know, that they are important and they are put here for a purpose and a reason, then, you know, this number should be 0. 1 is too many. Thank you for your time.
Thank you both for being here. You make some very valid, some good points, and I assure you it's an area that every member of this board is very concerned about.
And
you have
I did just want to add, Ms. Hubbard and Ms. Brooks, I can't imagine the experience that you've had, and our heart certainly goes out to you as, you know, as well as to the family that had the experience last week. I do feel it important just to say that we do have some mental health counselors. I don't say that to pretend that we've got it all together and we've checked every box we need to check. We do have 7 mental health counselors in our school district, 4 that are employees of the school district and 3 that are contracted through the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. That's not to say we don't need more. I know that's one of the questions, and that's something that our board's going to wrestle with and something that we're going to be talking about in the coming months as we look towards next year. But we do have mental health professionals serving all of our schools. And Ms. Simmons and I met with them last semester with all 7 of those mental health professionals, as well as one of the supervisors from the Department of Mental Health. And they assured us that anytime a student is presented with suicidal thoughts or significant mental health issues, that they are served immediately. Again, I'm not saying we're doing everything perfect. We can all do things better. But we do have safety nets in place. And if you hang around a little while, you're going to hear a presentation, because we've got a group that's been working on student health for since July. and they're going to make a presentation here shortly. It is a serious issue. We agree with both of you, and we thank you for being here speaking tonight.
And again, we, as Dr. Thorson said, we will begin probably next month discussing, early discussions of the budget for next school year. And I assure you, and I think the other four will agree with me, that will be an area of interest when we're talking about personnel for next year. Thank you for being here. Okay, discussion items, December financial report. Ms. Moore.
Yes, sir. You all have a report. There's nothing particularly outstanding as far as I can tell. I'd be happy to answer questions if there are any. Yes, sir.
The purchase services, further down. They seem to be negative already.
Where's that?
I don't have mine up and running, and I can't scroll this. It's further down under your purchase services. There's a tendency where the percentages are. You'll notice how there's purchase services are exactly. Yeah, there's some for like. Okay, let's look at the one. Here it is. Exceptional program. You had $24,100 in it. They spent $84,000 for a 225.62% over. What would this kind of purchase services? What are these?
Likely it would be speech therapists.
There was a need, in other words, and then we did not have it budgeted. Okay.
So we started the year fully staffed with speech therapists, correct? I think that's correct. We developed a need during the school year, so we had to hire a contract service because we could not find a licensed speech therapist to hire ourselves. So, Ms. Moore, correct me if I'm wrong, but because I think we had someone leave, and that would mean that our salary projection would be less because we're not paying that person who was an employee of ours, and it's essentially we would have to transfer that to purchase services because we were having to contract with an outside agency. So while that looks like a very large negative, and it is, some of that money would have been used in salary had that employee stayed with us. So it's not quite as glaring maybe as it appears.
And I haven't made any revisions to the budget yet, so if that salary,
There'll be some
the
adjustments.
salary money is still there, but the purchase services.
As we did before. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Moore. Policy JFB-E1, school choice application. Mr. Andy.
Yes, it seems like every year at this time we bring this policy up and revisit it, and it's typically just the application part. We've not changed the criteria at all. And on this, what we want to do is, last year we start the 1st of March and we extended the deadline to the end of June, and this is going to have to be fixed. So this got the dates flip-flop. But some of our elementary principals don't work necessarily the last week in June. So we had people calling they didn't get, if they went in there on June 29th and they put their application in, they were calling up here wanting to get an answer because the principals had not been in there checking it and being able to see it because they were off. And they stay off the week of the 4th, and they have, elementary schools have one more week they're closed after that. So in order for us to be able to tell folks before our staff goes on vacation and does those kind of things, we're going to ask that we have the wording say they will be due by the first Friday in June. So like this year, that'll be June 7th. Next year, it'll be the 6th. It'll just, so we don't have to keep bringing it back and putting a number by the date. We're just going to say the first Friday in June. And we also would like to actually remove this form from the policy in case we do have to tweak it. It's typically misusing myself to talk about it with leadership team about it, and nothing's going to change with the policy. This is just the application for it. So I would ask two things. One, that we'd be able to put in there the first Friday in June as the deadline, and two, that you take this out of the policy and make it just one of our forms we use district-wide for school choice.
And that will be on the agenda for
It will be, it'll be on
next
week and then in February, so we'll get it done just before the window opens. We do everything online. Mr. Shepherd sets up the spreadsheet and the application, and so, you know, automatically emails parents back and everything. So we want to be able to start March 1st, so we'll go through 2 more.
And the first Friday in June guarantees that it's at least a 2-month period that people have to sign up for school choice. So it's a long, at least 8 weeks, probably 9 weeks time period that families would have to make application for this. So it's not, you know, it's not a quick trigger on that.
It
It's
used to be
just
2
plenty of
weeks
time.
when it first started. So we'd like to do that, and we do the messenger calls. The schools send home a form with the kids, because you have to renew it every year. So if you do school choice, it doesn't automatically carry over to the next year. You got to reapply. If you meet the criteria, you're automatically grandfathered in. We don't send anybody out. But we do have a discipline part to it, an attendance part to it, and a grades part to it that they have to meet in order to be eligible for school choice. So those don't change.
Any questions of Mr. Hebe? Next, the Student Behavioral Health Committee presentation, Ms. Simmons.
Or you want to sit? You want to sit or sit? Just, that's okay. Absolutely.
Good evening, I'm Lisa Simmons, the Assistant Superintendent of Instruction for the School District of Oconee County. Our Student Behavioral Health Committee is here to present the work that we've been doing thus far. Our committee was joined together in July of 2018, so we've been spending some time together working on different initiatives. We do want to recognize this evening that a student's behavioral health is really important, not over for their well-being overall, but also we know that it can cause significant impact to their academic achievement while they're in school. So the goal of our committee was to begin our work and be able to share out with our community and our school board what we've, created thus far. By the first of the year, so we were right on target with our goal for that. But also in September, October, the School Board Association for South Carolina presented a suicide prevention policy, which was right in line with the work that we had already started as a committee. So it was good that we were able to get that policy and obtain feedback from principals, guidance counselors, mental health counselors, and to begin the work and making sure that we're able to comply with that policy as we move forward. Also, I did want to share that at a lot of our state level meetings that a lot of our committee members have been attending, this work, just not only on suicide prevention, but on student behavioral health, is very much a topic that's in discussion right now across the state and nation. It's good for us to report that when our committee members are sharing the work that we're doing, that it seems to be that Oconee County, where we are ahead of the game in what we've been talking about in the work that we've been doing as a Student Behavioral Health Committee. I wanted to share with you the members that we have presently in our committee, and of course we know that this is going to grow just based on the different areas that we're going to be working on over time and the expertise that people within our county and our district have to be able to supply their input. So we have Bridget Bradley, she's our lead school psychologist. Carrie Carter, high school level school counselor. Sheridan Crouch, elementary level school counselor. Stacy Frick, she's our lead mental health counselor. Anna Gibson, assistant director of special education. Paula Grogan, middle school level school counselor. Joseph Powell, middle school level school counselor, Alika Queen, district social worker, and myself. We tried to have a variety of levels and also attendance area representation to make this committee complete as we move forward. The purpose of the work that our committee is doing, first of all, is prevention. We've been exploring a lot of school-wide curriculums that can provide prevention support to our students on behavioral health, as well as anti-bullying programs. Some of the things that we have been looking into or actually implementing is mental health first aid. We offered some sessions during our Summer Institute courses this summer. Nonviolent crisis intervention training for teachers and support staff. Ravenel Elementary is piloting the Alveus anti-bullying program this year so that we're able to obtain data and feedback from them with that program. And also we have BARC implemented, which is a monitoring of student searching that our administrative staff has access to, as well as counselors, to kind of, you know, make sure that we're not missing any searching that might be alarming that we need to address. This work also fits into the state has a multi-tiered support system framework that all districts in our state are supposed to be working on implementing. This doesn't just include what we're doing to support our students academically, but also preventive and reactive components when we're talking about student behavioral health. And then also, like I stated, our South Carolina School Board Association also has this need that we need to address all of these needs, and so that we are also making sure that we meet that. Our immediate needs that we're responding to in the moment are suicide and threat. Our committee, you know, recognizes that developing really a comprehensive model to address student behavioral health is a lengthy process, which is why we started in July, because we knew that we were going to need a lot of time to develop a process that meets the immediate needs for our schools, but also to create tools that our schools can use when assessing suicide and other threat risks. We recognize that our schools need tools to support them recognizing suicide ideation and attempts, as well as threats. So we have been diligently working on suicide and threat assessments and protocol involved with that. I am going to turn it over to Bridget Briley, our lead school psychologist, that she reviews the policy with you.
Just go to the next slide. There we go. Just leave it right there for just a minute.
The Student Behavioral Health Committee shares the board's concerns regarding the importance of protecting the health and well-being of all students by having procedures in place to prevent, assess the risk of, intervene in, and respond to suicide. Go ahead, open up the policy. If you would, if you'll refer to the policy JLD-BBR, it's titled Suicide Prevention, Intervention, and Postvention. As I go through this, keep in mind that this policy is not the detailed step-by-step process in how we're going to prevent, intervene, or respond, but rather it provides a direction. If you take a look at the policy, this came from the South Carolina School Board Association. Everything in red in this document was what was drafted by that association. The blue is what additions or changes that, after review of the Student Behavioral Health Committee, the school psychs in our district, as well as the guidance counselors in our district and mental health workers, and after presentation to the principals, this is what we have concluded. There is one component that, since you've received the exhibit, that has been added that I'll share with you in the next slide, that elaborates a little bit more on direction for suicide postvention. So if you take a look at the policy, some of the references I want to point out where this information came from. It comes from the Suicide Prevention Lifeline and Resource Center, comes from the Center for Disease Control, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, the National Association of School Psychologists, the American School Counselor Association, and the Trevor Project. So as you look at the document, at the policy, the first few components is just the definitions. And then it moves into suicide warnings, and subsequent pages list the risk factors, protective factors, and if you look over for just a moment the protective factors, these are some things that when we look at our curriculums, when our committee considers the process and the steps this is a really important piece that we want to make sure that those curriculums and things that we look at really consider those protective factors. The policy also includes suicide risk management. So this is where we're getting more into the intervention component of that, where we're looking at school-wide screenings for mental health. That would be a way for our committee to recognize and be able to intervene with students prior to any kind of risk. So it would be early assessment through screening, school-wide screenings. And actually district-wide screenings is what we've been talking about. But this also goes as far as talking about, well, when a child does attempt to suicide, how does a school respond, or if there's a risk of it? Our BARC programs, we recognize, have really picked up on a lot of keywords and phrases that's allowed us to be a little bit more responsive. And again, this policy really is kind of looking at that whole scope of things. But in this risk assessment, and Stacy Frick is going to share with you guys in just a moment some of the actual documents that we've created to kind of look at the process for assessing risk.
Bridget, can
Yes.
I just say two quick things?
Yes.
Number one, I recognize you probably can't read this very well on the TV monitors. If you go to the school district website and click on the school board tab, you can easily find the agenda to all of our school board meetings. The agenda for tonight's meeting will be listed on that school board site, and you can click on this policy and read it, respond to it, email us if you have any questions. That was one thing I wanted to share. The second thing is you've heard a couple of references tonight to BARC. Just to be a little more clear on what that is, we've implemented one-to-one technology in our schools now, so all of our students have Chromebooks. This is a program that actually monitors students' keystrokes. It's not just an internet search. It could be a Google document that they're typing. Any type of keyword that would indicate a student is having suicidal thoughts or some type of threatening behavior, it will take that whatever that student typed that would possibly indicate that and email the administrators at the school and say which student typed it, what was typed. I had a principal just last week tell me that he received a notification at 11:45 at night that a student had searched for something that would indicate suicide was at least in this student's mind. He called a parent at 11:45 at night and was able to talk to that mom and say, I'm not saying there's something definitely wrong, however, your child just typed this. And of course the mom was very appreciative. So that's the kind of technology we're able to implement. But that's what BARC, when they refer to BARC, that's what they're talking about. Thank you. Sorry.
And the rest of the document just addresses this, like I said before, the student suicide risk management, which goes into the evaluation, suicide assessment, which encompasses screening, as well as returning to school after an attempt or a crisis. And we're proposing to add, go to the next slide. We're proposing to add postvention to this section. Upon the notification of a student's death by suicide, crisis intervention strategies designed to reduce the risk of suicide and suicide contagion will be implemented. Support will be provided to help the survivors cope with a suicide death. Crisis strategies will also be implemented to address the social stigma associated with suicide and disseminate factual information. One thing I just want to reiterate is that this is policy. This is not our step-by-step process of how we plan on to carry out, prevent, or intervene, or provide postvention. The committee continues to work on prevention and school-wide curriculums to reduce suicide risk factors, including suicide prevention and anti-bullying programs. And there's also work to be done regarding crisis response, which will include how to respond suicide postvention. What we're going to be sharing next through our documents is responding only to suicide risk. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Stacy Flick, who is our lead district mental health counselor.
So first up, for the families that shared, thank you for your courage and your bravery to stand up here and share your stories with us. I have worked with families who have had suicide, and I know that it's not something that is something that you spend a lifetime coping with. So again, thank you for sharing your stories with us today, and know that this committee does have our children's needs at the heart of the center of what we're doing each and every day when we're in the family. Okay. So we're going to go over what documents that we have come up with. This is a procedure, and what schools, hopefully all school districts will adopt and be doing the same exact thing. So there's no question about what we do. Here it is. The first one that you'll see is sort of a kind of a guideline of what we do and how to respond to it. It will start with if the student has a suicide risk, and it goes through whether it is an immediate need attempt or if it's an ideation and what you do. And it'll go down through and talk about whether EMS, it talks about how the student should always, a person should always be assured of the student's safety at all times. Who do we call, who do we contact, who's involved in that process? Always going to end with the same result. A safety plan is always going to be put in place, whether it's when they re-enter school or whether it needs to be done at that moment in time. If you look at the document that goes along with this, it's our definitions. I always think it's good that everybody's on the same page of what those definitions are. It will describe to you what a suicide risk is, an attempt with immediate medical need, attempt with significant self-harm, who's going to secure the student, the safety, if we need EMS or safety response, what we do for parent contact, the contact of a mental health provider, and it's got a list of who we are considering mental health providers. The safety information, what our plan for re-entry is from school. This could be anything from a person who's had to take the day off to recoup, from somebody who also has had hospitalizations for an attempt of suicide, and then also our documentation. So in our guideline list, it's going to have the documentation that we're going to provide to make sure that we have covered all our bases for that student to ensure their absolute safety. The next one is the screener that we're proposing to use. This screener is used by Anderson Oconee Pickens Mental Health. It is recommended by them. It is also recommended by the State Department of Education, and it's an initiative through the South Carolina Youth Suicide Prevention Initiative to use the screener too. It's called the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. It is user-friendly. It is something that any of the response team, any of them can use. It's going to be highlighted in the colors, and if you look at below, it'll tell you what those colors are. So if there's a yes for the couple of the yellows, but there's not a yes for the rest of them, you know that it's a low risk. If it's orange, you know that it is a moderate risk, and if you had checks in the yes questionnaires, it's an immediate notification of a physician, and that would probably be like the immediate need, EMS, or someone else, or a parent taking them to the doctor to make sure that they are safe. The next one is the parent notice of safety concern. Be very important for parents to be notified that this is an issue with their child. This is something that we're working on with. We'll bring the parent in. This is the documentation that says that your child has expressed concerns about a statement about suicide, and we're informing you of this. It gives some tips or how to talk to your child. Also to provide supervision, safety-proof your home. If they come in with an idea of how they're going to do it and there's guns in the home, we would recommend that you remove all the guns from the home. Or if it's razor blades, we would make sure that you got rid of all your razors. And so those kind of things, we would give you advice on how to follow that. We have some numbers of some emergency contact numbers outside of school that you can call, or after hours. Of course, 911 is on there. And then any other recommendations that we need as far as seeing a mental health professional. That would be signed by the parent, the school administrator, and the mental health provider. Again, the school psychologist, the district social worker, or the guidance counselor are all listed under those mental health providers. Our final document is our personal safety plan. This personal safety plan is done in conjunction with the child. It's very much their words and how they're going to set that up. We identify what those triggers are, the emotions, what the warning signs are for them. We talk about what are some ways that they could deal with those emotions, and we check off, or if there's another one that they like to do, we would do that. What is the most important thing for them? We're trying to give them hope, trying to give them something that they know what they want to live for. Who can I talk to? We've got listed people at school, people at home, and then again, we have those emergency contact numbers for people. On the back of that page, or the second one, is our re-entry form. This is what we're going to do when the child comes back to school. We're going to assess their level of need, what it was prior and what it is now, and make a plan of what that we're going to review the safety plan so that we know that all those steps are in place. There'll be a designated person, whether it's a mental health provider or someone else, who will meet with that child regularly to make sure they're reintegrated and that they are doing well. Contact with a parent will always be in there, and then anything else that we might need to provide at that meeting. And so those are our documentations that we're proposing to go along with our policy and procedures. And then we're finishing up with just one or two things.
We wanted to be sure that we address kind of our next steps, where we are going from here with this process. First is crisis response. You did hear briefly about that. This is a very complex portion of what we're working on in our group, and it includes many components, not just from death of a student via suicide, but could also be a teacher that is passed away or a student that's passed away in another way. How to cope with that disaster, and what is our policy and procedure that we have in place when something like that happens, because we know that every situation may be a little bit different, so we want to be sure that we have a specific plan in place. Also, our school-wide curriculum to support our students' social and emotional learning. Like we've mentioned, we are looking into school-wide curriculums, our screenings that we would like to do district-wide that may help pinpoint areas of concern. We mentioned the anti-bullying program that's being piloted at Ravenel. And we're also looking into the Choose Love curriculum that is pre-K through 12th grade, working on social and emotional well-being of students and how we can work with them in that area. And then our third next step is our threat assessment. We've actually brought in Evie Hughes. She's our Director of Student Services. She's helping with that work as well. We've included some funding in our Title IV plan through the State Department, and making sure that we are looking at research-based work through Dewey Cornell, out of the University of Virginia. So making sure we have some good, valid research behind what we're working on and trying to implement in our next steps of what our committee is doing. We're meeting again at the end of January. We're starting to kind of pick up our pace with the number of meetings that we're having from now through the course of the end of the school year. We are anxious to be able to continue to share with you the work that our committee is doing, not only to our school board, but also to our community and our schools and the leadership within our schools as well. And just as Dr. Thorslund mentioned, we really do want you to be looking at the policy, what we've presented this evening, because your feedback, I've already received some today, which I very well appreciate that. It allows us to make sure we're being as thorough as possible, and making sure we're taking into consideration other things that people may be thinking as possible concern areas. We don't want to miss addressing something that might be of concern to you all as well. So thank you for your time this evening as we present this work to you. I also want to thank a lot of our Student Behavioral Health Committee members who are here. They weren't presenting, but this work is very important to them, and they wanted to be here to show their support for that as well.
You have a question, sir? We normally don't take questions, but if it's very brief.
Yes, I am a member of the Oconee County Concerned Citizens Against Bullying group, and I understand, I was listening about Ravenel and all, and that's what we're trying to do, is to get all the information that we can get. If you go on Facebook, you'll see over there, you can leave a comment for us.
Okay.
Okay.
So I just was listening, so I want to make sure I heard everything right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here.
And if I could just make one other comment, I think it's pretty obvious after you've heard the report that this presentation tonight was not in response to the tragedy that happened last week. We struggled with whether to leave this on the agenda with that being so recent. But we also realized that that kind of emphasizes the importance of this topic. So we decided to leave it on the agenda. It is an important thing, and this committee is doing great work. And we want the board to act on it as soon as possible. So we did that, make the decision to leave it on the agenda, but again, it's not in response to what happened last week. They've been working for months on this, and it's something that we need to get in place as soon as possible and make decisions to benefit students as soon as we can. Christie has her hands up.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like for the committee to contact me. I think through my child's experience this year at West Oak, that there are some things that you did not highlight today that you can learn from our experience.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and to the committee, thank you for your efforts and many hours of work that's evident in this. Look forward to seeing the finished product. Right, you're still there. You're a popular lady tonight.
Okay. Dr. Bibb and I, Greg Bibb, he is our Director of Data and Assessment, and myself, we were going to be doing a overview of the South Carolina school report cards for you. So we would like to do that at this time. So I'll let you pull it up. So the purpose of the South Carolina School Report Card is just to give a glimpse into our schools, how they're performing on some key performance indicators. It's also to provide parents and community members with tools to understand our schools, maybe ways that they could help and serve students within our schools. And it's also just our state's aspirations to how they want our schools to be perceived in the state, and what they think are the most important indicators for us to be meeting. And then the overall goal is for our students to meet the expectations of the profile of the South Carolina graduate. And this is a visual of the profile of the South Carolina graduate. It is something that's on the forefront of probably most conversations in education throughout our state, wanting to be sure that our students have world-class knowledge, world-class skills, and our life and career have those characteristics that we would like them to exemplify once they graduate from high school as well. So you're going to hear throughout the presentation, it's going to keep bringing you back to the profile of the South Carolina graduate as really being a key role and focus in the report cards. All right, understanding ESSA, South Carolina, it stands for the Every Student Succeeds Act. It was a U.S. law that was passed in December of 2015. It took the place of No Child Left Behind, and it really governs the United States K-12 public education policy. So our state was required to submit a plan to the U.S. Department of Education. It contained certain measures, for example, measuring the progress of our English language learners, high school graduation rate, and we'll continue to talk more about what those measures are as we go through our presentation. But this report card in 2018 was the first issued report card since the state submitted their ESSA plan to the U.S. Department of Education. So kind of understanding the ratings of the report card, each elementary, middle, and high school received an overall rating, a rating that was based on 7 of the 10 factors that were reported. It is based on a 100-point scale. The school's overall rating was based on just those 7 rated indicators and their performance there. And of course, these ratings then are the school's basis on whether they're meeting the profile of the South Carolina graduate. There are different levels of the ratings. As you can see, there's excellent, good, average, below average, and unsatisfactory. And then it tells you a little bit of an explanation of each one of those ratings and the percentage of, where those schools would fall. So our excellent, we're talking about the top 15%, and these schools' performance substantially exceed the criteria for students meeting the profile of the South Carolina graduate. When we go down to good, they're exceeding those expectations of the criteria. Average is they're meeting them. Below average means the school may be in jeopardy of not meeting the criteria based on their performance. And then unsatisfactory just says that their performance fails to meet the criteria for the profile of the South Carolina graduate, which is the bottom 10% of schools.
Can I jump in?
You can.
So just so that everyone understands, this is not a 100-point scale that you would expect if you took a test in a class, where if you make a 90, you get an A, if you make an 80, you make a B. That's not the kind of scale. If you notice, 4 and 5, those two groups, below average and unsatisfactory, the 35% and 10%, guaranteed that 45% of the schools in South Carolina were going to fall in one of those two categories. So no matter what the scores were, if every middle school in the state of South Carolina scored 90 or higher, the bottom 45%, meaning those scores that were 90, 91, 92, would be below average or unsatisfactory. So these numbers they're forced into these percentages. So that's important to realize. It's not the way you would normally think of a 100-point scale.
And then the EOC, or the Education Oversight Committee, they're recommending keeping these target percentages in place for at least 5 years. So it allows schools to improve within a consistent system. So now we're going to move into how the elementary and middle schools are rated. There are a few areas that the high schools are rated on that the elementary and middle schools are not. So the point values that you see below are based on a school that would have 20 or more English learners. And in the parentheses out to the side are for schools that do not fall into that category, so they would not receive a rating for EL proficiency. So you can see the breakdown is academic achievement, 35 points, student progress, 35 points, preparing for success, 10 points, English language learners proficiency, 10 points, and school quality, 10 points. And then this just gives you a visual of what that pie looks like as far as the weighting of each one of those areas or indicators. For our high schools, again, the point totals are based on schools having 20 or more English language learners. And again, out to the side, the parentheses are for the schools that does not apply to. We have academic achievement, 25 points, preparing for success, 10 points, English language proficiency, 10 points, graduation rate, 25 points, college and career ready, 25 points, and school quality, 5 points. And then you also have the visual there that shows you how that's weighted as well. Dr. Bibb and I thought it was important for y'all to know what the South Carolina transformational goals are. They're pretty ambitious goals for our state that are built around that profile of the South Carolina graduate. And these first 3 are things that they are wanting to accomplish by 2035. So the first one is on-time graduation rate of the state. Each district in high school should be at least 90%. 90% of our students will score a level 2 or higher in English and language arts and math. So for like our elementaries and middle school for SC Ready, that means they'd be scoring at the approaches and above levels, and then scoring a D or higher on an end of course assessment. And then also the last one there, 70% of our students will score a level 3 or higher in ELA and math, and that would be meets and above on the SC Ready assessment at the elementary and middle level, and a C or higher on an end of course assessment. And then the last transformational goal, this is actually going to be beginning with the graduating class of 2020, that the state must increase annually by 5% the percentage of students who graduate ready to enter post-secondary education to pursue either a degree or a national industry credential without the need of remediation. So it's really important that we're talking not only about graduation rate, but also do our students have a plan once they leave us, especially if they're not going on post-secondary, what are we doing with them career-wise? Because there's two different paths there that are both very important. I was going to go into just a little more detail about the rated indicators. Like we said, our schools are rated out of 7 out of the 10. So there are 3 that are not actually included in the rating but are reported to you all. So in academic achievement, that's looking at whether the school's meeting the state standards in English, language arts, and math. For student progress, that's the overall student growth improvement academically in ELA and math, as well as focusing on the lowest 20% of the students and how they're performing, looking at that particular group of students. Preparing for success is meeting the state standards in science and social studies. In English learners proficiency, how our non-native English speakers are meeting growth targets to learn the English language. College and career ready, students graduating from high school are prepared for college and career after graduating. And graduation rate, it's the percentage of students that are entering high school in the 9th grade and graduating in at least 4 years. And then school quality, if students feel engaged in their school, and reports data to better understand the overall climate of a school, and that's through our engagement survey that our students did at the end of the school year last year. And then our non-rated indicators, there are 3 of those, which is classroom environment, all data that's collected about teachers that are in the school and how that relates to their student success. Student safety, information about unsafe incidents that occur like on the school grounds, on bus transportation, at school-sponsored events, and then financial information that's collected about schools and school districts, like average salaries, percentage of money spent on classroom instruction. Dr. Bibb is going to go into a little bit further about how those, what those indicators and how they're reported.
This advances. Okay, I have a slide for each of those indicators, and I tried to maybe give you a little more specifics without getting bogged down into the real number crunching. But if you want to crunch some numbers, come by sometime, and I'll be glad to do that with you. As Ms. Simmons mentioned, one of the indicators that gets a rating is academic achievement. What do we mean by college and career ready in reading, math, and writing? Well, in grades 3 through 8, the testing program we call SC Ready. Kids take ELA and math. Then at the high school and sometimes middle school level, we have what's called the end of course testing program. In certain courses, students take what's called an end course exam, which counts 20% of their grade. Those tests are categorized in the course similar to what the test you would take in, that a teacher would make out, A, B, C, D, F. So each test is assigned a point value. F gets 0 points, D gets 1 up through an A. And then for SC Ready, they don't have A, B, C, D, F. They have not met, approaching, met, and exceeding, and they assign a point value to those. So it's kind of like scoring a track meet. You know, you take those points, add them all up, get a percentage, and then you can go to the 100+ page accountability manual and find the appropriate chart and look up that percentage, and it'll tell you what that rating is. So that's academic achievement. And I will say we simulated these ratings before the report cards came out in the 5 of 7 that we're able to, and we're close enough that we believe that give me a hint. Oh.
There we go.
Anyway, our simulations were very close to the state in that category, enough to make me think that their calculations were good. There was some little bit of concern about accuracy of some of the report card data early on. I think ours was good. Student progress. This one we're not able to simulate because there is what's called a value-added model used. In other words, we take a snapshot of your test score in the spring of 2018 and we're going to compare it to the spring of 2019, see what kind of improvement you made. Did you add value to your school's score? That's a proprietary model. They don't let us in on how it's exactly constructed. If you hear the acronym EVAAS, EVAAS, that's what it's referring to, that model. But anyway, this gets at status versus improvement. So your status may not be very high, but if you made improvement from one year to the next, you get some credit for it. That's what this is designed to do. Then preparing for success takes sort of what I call the other side of our statewide assessment. We talked about ELA and math. This takes the science and social studies results. Kids in 4 through 8 take science or social studies. Third graders don't take it, and it alternates. 4, 6, and 8 take science. 5 and 7 take social studies. If you're taking biology or U.S. history, it's part of it at the high school level. I don't think we have any middle schoolers taking those 2 courses. And again, you get a point values assigned depending on the category, whether it's A, B, C, D, F, or in the case of SC Pass, they divide it up into the not met, met, so on and so forth, categories. And then generate a percentage out of that based, it's simple math, add it up, divide by the total possible and get a percentage, and then there's a chart you can look at to see what that rating would be. There is an indicator especially for, we call them ESOL students, English learners, ELL, they're known different, I guess by different abbreviations. There is a statewide assessment called Access that's given just to these students. That test is broken up into 4 sub-tests, if you will: listening, speaking, reading, writing. And don't ask me how they came up with this number. The magic number is 4.4. If you score that on your composite, your overall, then you exit the ESOL program, so to speak. And so the state set up some interim benchmarks over 5 years to eventually get to the 4.4. And again, the accountability manual has that table that shows year 1, here's the percent we'd like scoring that 4.4, and it moves up each year through year 5. All right. College and career ready. I guess this is, if you hadn't crunched enough numbers by now, here's one where you can really get into some arithmetic. This is for high schools. Obviously, elementary and middle are not, they don't get a rating for this indicator. So I set it up in 2 columns. One is ask the question, are you college ready? The other asks the question, are you career ready? And you can be college ready if you meet any of those in other words, you get credit, you get a, let's say, a check mark by your name for college ready if you meet any of that criteria below. 20 on ACT, 10, 20 on SAT, and so forth. And then for career ready, if you meet one of those following underneath there, having to do with, are you a K completer? Did you earn one of the, on the career readiness assessment, which has kind of evolved over years. Have you ever heard of work keys? We used to do work keys. Now it's called Ready to Work, R2W. But anyway, that factors in. They also, ASVAB, which is an aptitude battery given by the military. You can be considered career ready if you score 31 or higher on it. So there's several different ways to do that. And they just simply take the number of students, and let me back up a second. When I say number of students, who are we talking about? Well, let's rewind. The kids who graduated last year, the class of 2018, the students they're looking at are, take those students who graduated in 2018, go backwards in time 4 years where they entered the 9th grade for the first time. That's your, what we call the cohort. That's also how we do graduation rate. So you back up 4 years, capture those first-time freshmen, follow them 4 years until they graduate, and those are the kids that we're looking at to get to determine if they're college and career ready based on this criteria. So basically it's a percentage. Then when you get that percentage, again, there's a trusty little table there in that manual. You can look up and say, okay, 80% of our kids were college or career ready, so we earned X number of points. Graduation rate. Again, an indicator, obviously, the high schools would get, elementary and middle would not. And as I was just saying, go backwards 4 years in time, capture the kids who were first-year high school students 4 years ago. There's your denominator. In other words, there's the total number, and there's very strict criteria about can you be removed from that denominator. Basically, you have to transfer to another school, and we have to have documentation showing you did, immigrate to another country, go to jail, or die. And that's the only way you can, otherwise you count in that denominator. Then once you determine that rate, how many points do you earn? Well, number 3 there you can see, let's say one of our high schools had an 80% graduation rate, then you would take 80 minus 50, excuse me, if they were on the 30-point scale, let's say, I'm sorry, let's say the 25-point scale, that was easier. You just subtract from 50 from their rate and divide by 2. That's how many points you earn. So if somebody had, say, 90%, make the math easy. 90 minus 50 is 40, divided by 2 is 20. They earn 20 points in that category. Okay, this one has to do with a survey, an online survey each of our schools gave this past spring. This is one we cannot simulate because in order to do that you have to have the statewide data. So in other words, the state gathered all the results and ranked everybody, and so you get a point value based on where you, what percentile you were statewide, and we have no way of, I don't have Pickens County data, you get what I'm saying, so we didn't have any way to simulate that. I have some, as well as a lot of people around the state, some concerns about this survey because we weren't able to provide the kind of accommodations we should have for, say, non-readers and so forth. So it was hastily put together and shoved out there at us. I think the state will do better this coming spring. Okay, I won't read all these bullet points. This is, there were 3 categories where you don't get any point values, but they're reported. There's one of them, classroom environment. There's a second one, student safety, where they look at things such as suspensions, things that involve maybe law enforcement getting involved, and that sort of thing, but there's no rating involved. And then financial information, such as teacher salaries and how much did we spend on instruction and so forth. All right.
And then our final slide just provides some links to further information. The one at the top, if you would like to know specific information about any of the schools in our district and how their ratings came out, you can go to that link there. Overall, we had 1 school rated as excellent. We had 4 good, 9 average, and 2 below average. So we did not have any unsatisfactory schools, which is good because we weren't sure what to expect with all the changes and that type of thing. The expectmoresc.com is really a guide to the South Carolina school report cards, so that'll just give you more information on the presentation and the information that we shared with you this evening.
Any comments, questions? Thank you, Ms. Simmons. Dr. Bibb, thank you. And I believe you have one more also,
Yes.
Advanced Ed update.
I was talking with the district leadership team in preparation for our Advanced Ed visit. Our engagement review team will be here on March the 3rd and be here through March the 6th. And the reason why I just wanted to do just a brief conversation with y'all tonight is because the process has changed quite a bit since we went through accreditation 5 years ago. So I wanted to let you know that there were some expectations that we're used to that will not be taking place this time. This new process is a strong focus in continuous improvement. So we will be kind of revisiting a lot of the tasks that we've completed during this process, like surveys with teachers, students, and parents, inventories with teachers and students, a specialized observation tool that we were trained on, using these things throughout the next 5 years, addressing the improvement initiatives that we'll get feedback on during this visit. So it's more of a natural process instead of feeling like we're preparing every 5 years for them to come. So in saying that, we're used to having a formal school board meeting about the ratings that we receive through the process. That no longer is part of the process. So 6 weeks after our engagement review is finished, we will get the feedback from our engagement review team, which will be focused on themes, overall themes in our district, that gives us some flexibility on what we would like to choose as improvement initiatives, and then we'll compile a plan of action on how we're going to meet those expectations over the course of the 5 years. Each building level administration team has access to what is called My Journey, where it has all their data from their surveys and inventories, from their classroom observations, their diagnostic, which they can go in throughout the 5 years, change ratings, update where they are with certain initiatives related to continuous improvement. So it's been a mindset shift for all of us that have been involved with that process before. And you know, we don't want this to be like a dog and pony show. We want to get the best feedback we can on where we are as a district now, where we want to go. So we want to make sure that we're implementing this moving forward as naturally as possible. So I just wanted to let you know that there were some changes there with that, to not expect that formal meeting, but of course we will share with you the information we received from the team 6 weeks after their visit.
Questions, comments from Ms. Simmons? That concludes the open portion session of our meeting. We will return after executive session to take any action on items discussed in executive session. And again, thank you for being here. And I will need a motion for executive session for personnel items, employment recommendations and changes, and an update on the Seneca Middle School property.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion, we go into executive session for personnel items, employment recommendations and changes, and an update of the Seneca Middle School property.
I second.
Motion second, discussion. All in favor? Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the personnel recommendations made by the administration?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the recommendations on personnel by the administration.
I'll second that.
Motion second, discussion or questions? All in favor? Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, please.
Second?
Second.
We are gonna have discussion. All in favor?